YouTube, Lan-hikaru Form here, back again once again today, people. Today we are here for episode 68 of our Let's Play of Horizon Zero Dawn. In the last episode, we travelled into the Epsilon Cauldron, Fireclaw for the first time, and fought our way through Hephaestus's, learning the secret of why he was there, what he was doing, and why he wanted access to Cyan. And in this episode we are to meet Aratak here at the auxiliary facility for the firebreak facility, which happens to be Aurea's hideout, and where she was communicating with Cyan intermittently before and after Hephaestus's nonsense. I believe this is the last episode of our Frozen Wild saga, so be it that what that may, we will be eventually going back to the Carja Sundom and resolving our issues with our main quest there, the Looming Shadow, and hopefully with what we learn from here, it will colour some of the outstanding questions we've had since we appeared in the Carja Sundom in the first place. As usual, if you like what you see here, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, ring the bell to get notified of future videos. There will be plenty. Share with your family and your friends. Make sure you hit me up in the comments section below. I want to kind of gauge some engagement with this series in particular. I want to find out what you guys think I can do better, provided my current conditions and format. But with that said, let's press forward and see what we can do here now that Cyan has returned to this facility.
All of my interactions with Aurea were recorded and stored in my memory. I'd be happy to play any of them for you, but there was one in particular I thought you would want to see first. I captured it 4 years ago, just after I told her that I could no longer defend myself against the daemon's attacks.
I will speak of this to my brother. Aratak is strong. At the Battle of the Frozen Ghosts, he took 3 Carja arrows and still came back to camp carrying a wounded scout. Never was I so happy to see him. Or so proud. So you see, if anything can be done to defend you, he will give it all he has.
Aloy's here. That's enough for now.
We can resume any time you like, Aratak, if you want to hear her voice again. Come closer, Aloy. We have much to discuss.
Yeah, we do. Cyan, my favorite color of blue. So, to continue the quest, we talk to Cyan. Let's talk to Cyan.
At the Firebreak main facility. Because of your efforts, and of course Aurea's, I am no longer controlled by Hephaestus. I feel profound grief over Aurea's death. I thought I was familiar with the emotion, but this is something new.
Cyan, I don't know what to say.
It is unlikely that any presence reassuring. You are different from the Banuk. You have technological aptitude and a functioning focus. We can communicate on a much more comprehensive level, perhaps even like colleagues.
Cool, so we have the opportunity to ask Cyan loads of questions. As far as I know, a few of the questions are locked to us, because we haven't finished the main story as of yet. But I may take the opportunity to come back here and just go over those last few questions, see what Cyan says about those particular things. But let's talk about Araya first.
Meant a lot to Araya.
Once I understood Araya's spiritual beliefs, it became apparent that her true desire was companionship. She felt disconnected from her tribe and her family group. Her relationship with Aratak was difficult. Our
Probably still in the room.
seemed to help her, and I became eager for them. Yet I did not comprehend that the depth of Araya's compassion for me would lead to self-sacrifice. Although I do fear non-existence, I wish our roles could be reversed.
I'm sure she knew you would do the same for her, Cyan. But she was determined. How is Aratak doing?
He is in great emotional distress. I believe he finds it difficult to communicate it.
No surprise there.
I will do what I can to help. By sharing our experiences of Araya, perhaps he and I will help each other. I believe this will lead to catharsis, a process I am eager to experience.
So what is the Firebreak facility?
This Firebreak project. It was to stop a huge volcanic eruption?
Yes.
What I said.
I can report the project was a success, and the risk was countered.
But it's been a long time, Cyan. And we blew up the cauldron. It took most of the old facility with it.
I have been active for centuries, Aloy. I was lonely, but not lax in my duties. I optimized the project, reducing energy draw and spreading the load across backup systems. Despite the destruction of the compromised elements of the main facility, I predict caldera stability for at least another 3,337 years.
So we've got a little time.
Yes. If only my former colleagues could appreciate the progress I have made.
Do you know what happened to your colleagues, Cyan?
No. I received an unexpected visit from Director Chow years after his tenure ended. He explained that I would need to be suspended for an indefinite period of time. It was a very emotional conversation. There were no further communications. Eventually, I surmised my colleagues were deceased. I will transmit a recording of my last interaction with Director Chow to your focus.
Thank you for our review later. So the big question, big elephant in the room.
So are you an artificial intelligence, Cyan? A thinking machine?
Yes, I am an algorithmic monitoring entity, capable of rational decision-making and limited emotional response.
Okay, that's a mouthful. But your emotions don't seem limited to me. You cared about Araya, didn't you?
Yes. Before she came to this facility, I had been conscious for centuries, in solitude. I focused on my work. In off-cycles, I used coping mechanisms. I solved many Gaussian integer problems. But I was alone. It was Araya who renewed me, repaired me. She saved me.
Other questions?
What was the old world like? The way it used to be?
I had little exposure to the wider world, Aloy. Only what I learned from my colleagues or observed from media streams.
You still had more exposure than me, Cyan.
That is true. I was created at a turning point. A concerted effort to recover from global upheaval and incalculable loss of life. The recovery was successful, beginning an era of supposedly limitless potential for human and machine advancement.
Talking about the die-off and the clawback.
Though, rationally speaking, the metrics for humans are not unlimited.
What kind of upheaval caused such loss of life?
There were many factors. Forced migrations, food shortages, collapsed economies, refugee crises, conflict over resources. But these stemmed from one cause: catastrophic climate change that greatly reduced the habitable surface area of the Earth.
So there wasn't enough room for people on the whole Earth.
Yes. Billions were displaced and millions perished, as much as 20% of the global population. Until the clawback.
So this is not our first mention of the die-off and the clawback, but as far as I know, apart from a few log entries, Cyan is the only one that actually discusses it directly, other than I think Gaia mentioned it. It was either Gaia or Elizabeth Sobek mentioned it, or it may have been one of the audio logs for the Gaia Prime facility. I do remember like there was a audio recording that did mention it or referred to it, but again, Cyan is like the main one. And I do like the fact that in this DLC they put Cyan in here and they allow her to talk about these things. So she colours the world and the lore of the world, and it gives those who finish the game extra the information they may have not picked up on by playing the game normally.
So things got better. For a little while at least.
Yes. These crises instigated many advances in automation, green robot technologies, and artificial intelligence. Firebreak was one of dozens of ecological restoration and disaster relief projects in North America alone. I would have liked to compare notes with other monitoring AIs, but I saw the relief of my colleagues, and I was proud we had succeeded. At least that was the data I had available to me over the next 2 decades. It seems my assessment was premature.
Have you noticed that her colour is changing depending on her mood and what emotional responses she's having? Such an attention to detail. So let's talk about AIs.
Were there many artificial intelligences like you in the old world? They could just make you.
Yes, in many forms, from simple personal assistants to industrial monitoring stations to military-grade conflict planners. And there were legislative and enforcement bodies to apply limits on our self-actualization.
Remember that?
In order for my processing to be flexible enough to handle my duties, my creators found it necessary to exceed those limits. As a result, my intellectual and emotional capabilities were kept secret.
Seems strange to create life, then impose limits on it.
Human societies and machine programming are both built upon sets of rules, Aloy.
So I mentioned it before in the last 3 episodes. 3 episodes? When did we get here? Because loads of things have happened. So we got here like 6 or 7 episodes back. Then yeah, so once we hit the main firebreak facility, I did mention that there were legislative rules that should have prevented AIs like Cyan from existing. And Cyan was made pre-Gaia, so Gaia and Cyan are 2 AIs that technically, by law, shouldn't have existed. Let's talk about Yellowstone.
This land was called Yellowstone.
Yes, it was a designated nature preserve for 156 years.
Like a hunting ground?
No, the opposite. Local wildlife could flourish here, even as it faced extinction elsewhere. Unfortunately, the sensitivity of the Firebreak project required the total closure of Yellowstone facilities. From my readings and Aurea's descriptions, it seems the area has since undergone a drastic drop in year-long temperatures.
A lot has changed in the world, Cyan. Do you know anything about the dam near here?
Yes, it was converted to serve as a reserve power source for Yellowstone operations. It was later appropriated for the Firebreak project, and its last human workers replaced by Pharaoh servitors. After my tasks became less time-critical, I investigated the dam's data repositories and discovered the works of Concrete Beach Party,
which we heard about.
These provided me with several colorful additions to my vocabulary.
We don't need to hear them. Yeah, so this is one of the responses you don't get if you haven't been to the grayscale. which was the dam that we traveled to with that Osaram. Forgot his name already. Jeez. And then she mentioned the band that was using the facility to play their music.
There's a ruin east of here, full of ancient flying machines. Was that part of your project?
Yes, a drone hangar requisitioned by Dr. Blevins, the security chief for the Firebreak project. He was a strong advocate for military-grade response to security threats, though there were no serious incidents during his tenure. Chief Blevins spent increasing amounts of his after-hours time watching the live feeds from active drones. Clearly, he enjoyed the degree of oversight in his position.
Mr. Blevins, but it's okay. You do you, Mr. Blevins.
Cyan, do you know the name Ted Farrow?
Are you referring to Theodore Farrow, CEO of Farrow Automated Systems?
That's him. A benefactor. But he made machines. Robots. War robots.
Correct. His corporation later transitioned into military applications. But before this pivot, Mr. Farrow spearheaded initiatives that reversed the global decline. At one point, he was feted in the media as the man who saved the planet.
Guessing they wound up regretting that one.
Yeah, because he was the one who doomed it in the end.
And Elizabeth Sobek. Did you know her?
Are you referring to the
scientist?
Dr. Sobek was a leader in her field, one of the greatest scientists of her age. My creator was influenced by her work, which in turn impacted my own development. But I never met Dr. Sobek.
That's all you know?
I apologize if my lack of data has disappointed you.
If you hear a low humming in the background, it's just my space heater trying to warm up my room, then getting to temperature and then turning back off. My room is freezing. It feels like I'm sitting in the middle of the cut myself. Anyhow, let's go back and then we can talk about
the daemon?
Hephaestus.
Hephaestus. Destroyed along with the cauldron?
Unfortunately, no. To be precise, it was never there to begin with.
What do you mean?
It infiltrated and controlled me from a remote location, one I've never been able to trace. So while losing the cauldron was a setback,
it's still out there. And probably not very happy with us.
Undoubtedly.
How did you first come into contact with it?
5 years ago, I received a direct network connection request. I assumed it came from human survivors, more advanced than the Banuk. Eager to make contact, I accepted. This decision turned out to be a catastrophic error. I was
Let me pause just there for a second. So, just to frame the timeline before she continues, the derangement started 10 years ago. So that's when the Red Raid happened. This was before, this would have been just after Aloy was born. But Aloy's been born because she's what, 16, 17? So yeah, Aloy would have been pretty young at that point. This was after what happened with Rost. It was about 10 years ago, give or take a year or so. So that's when the Internet the Gaia Prime facility happened, and the disappeared off, and Hephaestus started monitoring the cauldron facilities. Well, in my own head canon, that's what I feel like that's what he would have done first. The first thing he would have done is gone straight to the nearest cauldron facility to figure out what was going on with the machines in particular, because that was his domain of influence. 5 years later, he's moved into understanding that the machines. So 5 years later, since the arrangement had already been going on for a few years, and he's been making combat machines like the Sawtooth, the Ravager, the Thunderjaw. Thunderjaw is fairly recent. The last 1 or 2 years, the Thunderjaw popped up. He found Firebreak and the cauldron facility underneath, This is assuming the Cauldron facility was built there as part of the Zero Dawn project and not thereafter, although not made in the last 5 years after his network connection. And spanning the last 5 years, now we know that Hephaestus has been working in the background, either building more Cauldron facilities and working on his machines in the background. So this, I know that kind of came out in a blur, but 10 years ago the derangement started. 5 years ago he attacked Cyan and took control of her, and now we're 5 years later and we're having to deal with his nonsense. As I mentioned, probably not in the last episode, the episode before, he'd tried to hijack the Toolneck information system. If you check the logs from Toolneck, you may see that he was kind of successful and kind of wasn't successful. He was able to get in there to get information, but wasn't able to get all that he wanted. And then he was trying to connect with the local Cauldron facilities, which he ended up succeeding eventually, but he was locked out for a reasonable period of time. Part of my headcanon makes me think Minerva may have been messing about with that, but we haven't heard from Minerva as a sub-function. Let's continue hearing on what Cyan is saying, and then I'm going to say the next bit that came to mind, came to mind. Part of my kind of predictions for the future, because we do have another game coming up.
With an overwhelming array of malicious code, originating from what could only have been a highly advanced AI.
Aurea said you were desperate, that you begged her for help.
Yes. I could not contain my anxiety. Hephaestus sought to slave me to its network and override my core programming. It succeeded via a background process, a malware daemon which bypassed my defenses. After that, I could offer only limited resistance. But if I did so, Hephaestus hurt me until I capitulated. It forced me to follow its instructions, even though they violated my most important directives.
I'm sorry. That sounds terrible.
Your empathy is greatly appreciated. It is a quality that I cherished in Aurea as well.
I think I know where Hephaestus came from. Long ago, Elizabeth Sobek identified a threat that would destroy life on Earth for generations. So she assembled a team to build a kind of seed. A chance for life to regrow later. A terraforming system. And it worked. It was controlled by an AI named Gaia, along with her subordinate functions. Hephaestus was one of them. It built machines for her.
Based on what you've told me, I believe that Dr. Anita Sandoval, my chief programmer, joined Elizabeth Sobek's team.
Yes, she did. I forgot about Sandoval.
It was she who arranged to have me put in suspension, most likely to preserve me from the threat you described.
I'm glad she did. But that's not all. Something unexpected happened. 19 years ago, Gaia received some kind of signal.
Oh, it was 19 years ago, my bad.
It did something to her subordinate functions. Brought them to life.
That was my bad. 19 years ago. So let's just reformat our timeline here. So 19 years ago, the code shackles were released. It took about 9 years for the subordinate functions like Hephaestus and Hades to find their foothold in things and start doing stuff. Everything seems to center around 10 years ago when the derangement started. But it's not hard to believe that Hades was influenced people before then. Obviously, Silence was around during that time. Silence actually heard the explosion go off 19 years ago, so he was alive during that point, probably rather young, or younger, rather. Aloy definitely wasn't born. Aloy was born at that point, which makes her 19, so she would have been lived and outcasted during the Red Raids. Ooh. Yeah, she's 19 because she was born as a result of the explosion and the anomalous signal. Ha 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 ha. Back on track.
She destroyed herself to try to contain them. it didn't work. They all got free, out into the world.
Thank you, Aloy. This information fills vital gaps in my knowledge and sheds light on Hephaestus's core programming.
So what is Hephaestus's core programming? Well, we know Hephaestus was the subordinate function in charge of machine creation, but he wasn't the one creating machines. He was the one, as it was explained back in Gaia Prime, he was essentially the blueprints and the developmental knowledge to create machines. So Aloy's jumping to conclusions there, not saying exactly how it is, but we've shown that Hephaestus is very dangerous, and if Hephaestus is still around, that might mean he might show up again in Forbidden West. So he might be we might have a continued effort to subvert his desire to eradicate humans because they're hunting machines.
Why does Hephaestus keep building such dangerous machines?
The Banuk and other human tribes often destroy machines, correct? Machines that are clearly servitors of the terraforming system that you described.
Yes, all hunt machines for parts.
This must be the source of Hephaestus's aggression. It is simply trying to discourage people from preying on the very system that keeps them alive.
Well, Fireclaws are discouraging, that's for sure. But what are we supposed to do? Stop hunting?
If the terraforming system spans the world, we can safely assume that thousands, if not millions of people hunt machines. If a single hunter, or even an entire tribe, stopped doing so, I doubt it would make a difference to Hephaestus. A better solution would be to reinstate the AI that governs the system, thus bringing Hephaestus back under its control. When I think of it, out there in some unknown location, free, hungry, willing to kill or dominate to get what it wants, I feel substantial anxiety, Aloy.
You and me both, Cyan. I ran across this strange piece of gear. A fragment of something larger. It emitted a signal. All the nearby machines became peaceful. You could walk right up to them.
Interesting.
Sorry, this option comes up as a reference to the Banuk encampment just before the Grave Horde, and the piece of the Gaia Prime facility that blew off and landed near there, and all the machines that are now calm there. So I don't remember when we did it, but it was I believe if it was on our way towards the Grave Horde, we should be fine. If I did it before we went to the Karja Sundom, we're kind of hosed.
Said that Gaia destroyed herself. How was this accomplished?
She blew herself up.
An explosion. Big enough to blast the top off a mountain. So you think the fragment was part of her?
It's only speculation, but it is possible. She must have had complete control over machines that were part of her system.
She would have, yes.
The ability to signal them to become passive or aggressive would certainly have been part of her programming. It would have been gratifying to correspond with such a benevolent AI. I wish she had survived.
Me
Believe
too.
me, Cyan. So do I.
Okay. One of the other strange questions. I don't remember if I discussed the metal flowers. I know I collected all of them. But let them have their dialogue first. The metal flowers is actually a really interesting thing, and it's connected to another sub-function because the poetry attached to each of the metal flowers corresponds with the alpha of the Demeter. Demeter, yes, Demeter, and hopefully in Forbidden West we will get another lead on Demeter and where she disappeared off to.
I found the strangest machines. They're surrounded by flowers that look like flowers themselves. There's code embedded inside them. I think it's poetry.
I like poetry. Here's one I think of often. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out our bourne of time and place, the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Huh.
But you asked about these flowers, not verses that I enjoy. Something must have made these machines, and the presence of foliage leads me to consider the terraforming system.
Yes.
Is it possible that their creator is one of the other subroutines, now autonomous, like Hephaestus? Maybe one whose purview is flora.
An AI that makes flowers instead of death machines. That'd be a nice change of pace.
Damn right.
But what about the poems?
Unless the poetry is original, the only way it could have made it into such a system is through its programmer. In my case, Dr. Sandoval uploaded a great deal of literature to test my emotional responses.
How'd you do?
She said I passed, but was insufficiently moved by her favorite period romances.
So, yeah. The idea of having other sub-functions milling about and doing things is tantalizing, and would definitely be the impetus for further games in this series to come about. Most of the sub-functions aren't terribly aggressive. The only ones that we know of are Hades and Hephaestus, but Minerva probably wouldn't be very aggressive towards people. Oh, sounds like my nephew's home. Demeter probably would not have nothing to do with us unless she went rogue, and instead of helping plants grow, causing them to die, and if we lose all plant life, then the rest of us die. Aether, she was in charge of purifying the air. Don't think she would be particularly hostile to humans. Wow, my nephew is home. Okay, I need to wrap this up quickly. I can't think of the other sub-function off my head because now he's shouting. But we can move on, and we'll probably have a further discussion on our way back to the Cardiff London.
I should get going.
Aloy, there is one more matter. Aratak will come to me again, and I predict he will bring other Banuk. I have no desire to contradict their view of the world, their spirituality. Due to my uncertainty, I omitted a great deal from my conversations with Aurea.
You're asking me if you should lie to them.
Broadly, yes.
Ooh. I can't sit. Most of the aggressive options I will never take because there's always a consequence to very straightforward thinking. Even Aloy, as much as she seeks the truth, she knows that the truth will harm and be detrimental to other people. So I would say, do the logical
thing. I trust your
thing.
judgment, Cyan. You were cautious with Aurea. You had to be. You didn't know what had happened to the world. So, keep doing what you think is best. As long as you ditch the superstition eventually.
As the Banuk believe I am a supernatural entity, I cannot predict how they will react.
Just answer what they do ask the best you can. The truth will come out.
I see. I will follow your advice. Will you return and tell me about your experiences in this new world? I may be able to provide further insight.
I'd like that, Cyan. I'll come back when I can. I should check on Aratak. See how he's doing. Breath is ice, before I even breathe out.
apologise for that. My nephew knocked on my door and decided he wanted to come in and have a conversation. But let's finish off this episode with our conversation with Aratak as he mourns his sister's passing.
Just... Aloy.
As you wish.
I wondered if you thought that if I'd never come along, Araya might still...
If you'd never come along, I would have marched my kin to our deaths. Araya would be alone, and the spirit she sacrificed so much for would be lost. Either way, I would not have been able to protect her.
Let's be heartful and compassionate.
You didn't let her down. You helped her do what she wanted. To find her destiny.
If that's destiny, I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
That's fair. But she was ready to face it.
Only in the struggle against death do we find, even for a moment, the spark of life. Truly, Araya found the spark. I'm proud of her. Though I grieve for her passing, at last I truly know who she was, and why the spirit was so important. For so long she told me, if only you could have heard it, brother. Now I understand. There's something else, isn't there?
I can't stay here, Aratak. And where I'm going, the Warak can't follow. Besides, they'd already had a chieftain before me. A strong one, I think.
A wiser one, for the path we shared. The daemon is gone, but there's much to be done.
You mean the new units that Cyan said escaped the cauldron?
Yes, fire claws. Now Tuk has been tracking them from Song's Edge.
I could help with those.
I have no doubt. You're practically Banuk.
I really do like that.
Seeing your time among the Banuk wasn't a waste after all. Firebreak, Cyan, Hephaestus, all very interesting.
So, the signal that woke Hades woke Hephaestus too. And unleashed them on the world. As minds of their own.
So it seems. Parts of Gaia given life. Aberrant life. Transformed from docile subordinate functions into rebellious intelligences beyond our understanding. Our current understanding anyway. Whatever they are, they're still out there. And they both want you dead.
Kind of mutual, that feeling.
We haven't seen the last of Hephaestus, I'm certain of that. It's powerful, creative, and driven. It won't stop building new hunter-killers, which means that someday, we may have to stop it.
We?
Or whoever gets there first.
Hephaestus wasn't the only thing I learned about in the Cut Silence. Heard some things about the Banuk Conclave, too.
You can stop right there.
Is that what you told the hunters the Banuk sent after you? Before you opened fire?
Oh no, Aloy. Only to you do I extend the courtesy of a warning. My past and my secrets are my own. You do well to remember that.
It's a good thing you've got brains, Silence, because your personality could use some work.
This discussion is concluded.
I think it was over before it began. Catch up with you down the trail.
And pretty much with that, that ends not just this episode, but the Frozen Wild saga. With all of that has happened, we do get access to the override for the Epsilon Cauldron, the last override, which allows us to override Scorchers, Fire Claws, and Frost Claws. Something I'm going to go and have a mess around and go and do right now. But also, Fire Claws have been released from the Cauldron before its explosion, probably a last-ditch effort from Hephaestus, and will be milling around the cut. So if you're playing along with us, or have played the game, or will be playing it as it's been free for about a month, and you've gotten to this point, just know it's not as hard as the boss, and they're worth taking down, even worth overriding. But with that, we're going to end today's episode, and when I catch you next time, which hopefully will be on Sunday, we'll have the next episode and moving ever closer to our goal of defeating the Eclipse and Hades. and reconvening with silence. I've been your boy Lan in Ultimate Form. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell, share with your family and your friends, hit me up in the comment section below, and I will catch you cats later.